Welcome and thank you for visiting Choose Democracy Now! I'm Dale Anderson, and in this post I'll share some thoughts about the big lie, a propaganda technique used by some of the most destructive and self-serving politicians of the last 100 years. I'll review what constitutes a big lie and why it can be so damaging to a nation and its people. Shown here are some of the most infamous promoters of big lies to have acted on the world stage. A Google search of big lie reveals the following definition from the Oxford Dictionary. A big lie is a gross distortion or misrepresentation of the facts, especially when used as a propaganda device by a politician or official body. Merriam-Webster defines a big lie in a similar manner, as a deliberate, gross distortion of the truth, used especially as a propaganda tactic. In January, Vietnam veteran and retired Justice of the Idaho Supreme Court, Jim Jones, penned an article entitled, "Big Lies Threaten the Stability of the United States." It was published in The Hill, one of the largest independent political news sites in the United States. Justice Jones wrote, "Unfortunately and most unexpectedly, big lies have arisen to inflict and endanger America's democracy in the last several years. Big lies have established a foothold in the United States, and they now threaten the stability of our country." Justice Jones continued, stating, "Former President Trump tried to maintain his grip on power by a multi-pronged strategy of election subversion, and when that failed, to recover power by persisting with a big lie that the election had been stolen from him." In Justice Jones' article, he referenced the American Psychological Association's definition of a big lie in their 2015 dictionary. Their definition states a big lie is a propaganda device in which a false statement of extreme magnitude is constantly repeated to persuade the public. The assumption is that a big lie is less likely to be challenged than a lesser one, because people will assume the evidence exists to support a statement of such magnitude. Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister in Nazi Germany, repeatedly used this technique when he charged Nazi enemies with heinous crimes. So in reviewing the dictionary and the APA definitions, we see the key elements of a big lie are that it is a deliberate political propaganda technique, a gross misrepresentation of facts or truth, and its constant repetition is intended to persuade the public to believe something that is not true. There is now an urgent need for Americans to understand that big lies endanger our nation. A big lie was promoted by the Nazis preceded World War II and the Holocaust. A big lie was used to justify America's disastrous invasion and occupation of Iraq. And President Vladimir Putin is promoting a big lie to the Russian people to justify his attack on Ukraine. Big lies are a core political strategy of former President and potential future presidential candidate Donald Trump. He's the first major American politician to campaign using big lies since Senator Joseph McCarthy in the 1950s. Donald Trump's first big lie was his claim that President Obama was not born in the United States. He started promoting the birther conspiracy lie in 2011 by questioning President Obama's birthplace during television interviews. He mused, "I'm starting to think he was not born here." In 2012, he tweeted an extremely credible source had called his office to inform him that Mr. Obama's birth certificate was a fraud. And then in 2014, Mr. Trump invited hackers to, quote, "please hack Obama's college records and check place of birth." None of his statements were true. All were entirely manufactured. Mr. Obama's citizenship was never in question. No credible evidence ever suggested otherwise. Yet it took Mr. Trump 5 years to admit the truth, after a campaign of relentless deception aimed at undermining the legitimacy of the nation's first black president. In a New York Times article in 2016, Michael Barbaro commented on Trump's birther lie. He wrote, "But this lie was different from the start, an insidious, calculated calumny that sought to undo the embrace of an African-American president by the 69 million voters who elected him in 2008. The essential question, why promote such a lie? Was it sport? Was it his lifelong quest to court media attention? Was it racism? Or was it the cynical start of his eventual campaign for president?" Barbaro's questions reflected what many wondered. Why would a politician promote such an easily refutable claim? To answer these questions, we need to consult Adolf Hitler. The big lie as a political strategy was first explained in his biography, Mein Kampf, published in 1925. In Chapter 10 of the James Murphy translation, Hitler writes, "In the big lie, there is always a certain force of credibility, because the broad masses of a nation are always more easily corrupted in the deeper strata of their emotional nature than consciously or voluntarily, and thus in the primitive simplicity of their minds, they more readily fall victims to the big lie than the small lie, since they themselves often tell small lies in little matters, but would be ashamed to resort to large-scale falsehoods. It would never come into their heads to fabricate colossal untruths, and they would not believe others could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously." And then Hitler summarizes, stating, "For the grossly impudent lie always leaves traces behind it, even after it's been nailed down, a fact which is known to all expert liars in this world, and to all who conspire together in the art of lying." As Hitler stated, big lies always leave traces. The birther lie became rooted in the public mind. In 2019, 4 years after Trump had admitted that Obama was born in the United States, surveys continued to show how deeply the general public continued to believe that the first black president of the United States was illegitimate. An Economist magazine poll in 2019 revealed 56% of Republicans still believed former President Obama was born in Kenya. Such is the power of big lies, when repeatedly spoken by politicians with access to powerful messaging technologies, such as radio in the instance of Hitler, or television and Twitter in the case of Donald Trump. In the reference survey, even 15% of Democrats said they believed it was definitely or probably true that Obama was born in Kenya. Note that it's a feature of big lies and their associated conspiracy theories that even direct evidence, such as the copy of Obama's birth certificate released by the White House, may not quell a big lie when promoted for months by a demagogue and a chorus of followers. In April 1943, New York Times war correspondent Edward James addressed Hitler's lies in an opinion piece. He wrote, "The Führer's lies are legion and colossal. His biggest is that Germany was not beaten in 1918. Hitler may be planning to use this lie again. Whatever Hitler's purpose in taking up the lie of an undefeated Germany, the record of the collapse is clear." He further writes, "It's quite evident that when one undertakes to pick the biggest lie told by Adolf Hitler, one at once undertakes to cover a wide territory indeed. The very record of the man is marked by a series of falsifications and deceptions, perhaps beyond the record of any other man who has played a role in public life." America's other notorious big lie promoter was Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy. In 1959, Robert Rovere published a book about McCarthy, the senator who created such havoc in the United States in the 1950s with his big lie about card-carrying communists infiltrating the U.S. Department of State. Rovere wrote, "The late Joseph McCarthy, United States Senator from Wisconsin, was in many ways the most gifted demagogue ever bred on these shores. No bolder seditionist ever moved among us, nor any politician with a surer, swifter access to the dark places of the American mind. Joe McCarthy was a champion liar. He lied with wild abandon. He lied without evident fear. He lied often and with very little pretense to be telling the truth. By being such an outrageous liar, he created interest in himself. His whole approach made it, on the one hand, practically impossible for the press to deny him publicity, and on the other, impossible for it to provide for its readers any comprehensible accounting of the ration of truth to falsehood in what he was saying. Recall that 3.5 days after the November 3, 2020 election, once all ballots were counted, the election results showed Joe Biden won with 306 Electoral College votes to Trump's 232 votes. Biden also won the popular vote by over 7 million. It wasn't an especially surprising result in view of the fact that during his presidency, Trump had been impeached by the House, was under investigation for a variety of potential business financial crimes, and had led the worst public health response to the pandemic of any developed nation. Greater than 771,000 deaths had occurred by the November election, and the economy had completely tanked. His abysmal performance was the primary reason he lost re-election. No claim of a rigged election was necessary to explain why the American public fired him from the highest office. In Richard Hassen's book, Cheap Speech, he describes Trump's response to election defeat. He writes, "Instead of accepting defeat, Trump immediately launched his biggest lie, that the election had been stolen from him. Within 3 weeks of the election, Trump had made at least 400 false claims of voter fraud on social media. He repeatedly called the election stolen and rigged. He spreads false statements about voting machines flipping votes for Biden. On December 19th, he tweeted, 'Statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. Will be wild.' On December 26th, he posted a tweet saying, 'If a Democratic presidential candidate had had an election rigged and stolen, with proof of such acts at a level never before seen, the Democrat senators would consider it an act of war and fight to the death.'" One of the timeliest books published in the last 5 years has been Yale professor Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. In lesson number 10, entitled Believe in Truth, he states, "To abandon facts is to abandon freedom," and goes on to explain that if nothing is true, then no one can criticize power, because there's no basis upon which to do so. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle, and the biggest wallet pays for the most blinding light. In January 2021, 6 days after the attack on the Capitol, Professor Snyder specifically addressed the issue of the big lie in a Twitter thread. He wrote, "A big lie demands conspiracy thinking, since all who doubt it are seen as traitors. A big lie undoes a society, since it divides citizens into believers and unbelievers. A big lie destroys democracy, since people who are convinced that nothing is true but the utterances of their leader ignore voting and its results. And further, a big lie changes reality. To believe it, people must disbelieve their senses, distrust their fellow citizens, and live in a world of faith." In an article published by the New York Post on January 6, 2022, the anniversary of the attack on Congress, the Post reported that former President Donald Trump had held his first political rally of the new year in Arizona, insisting that he had won the 2020 election without evidence. His series of lies began with, "I love Arizona. We had a tremendous victory in Arizona that was taken away." He continued, "Last year we had a rigged election and the proof is all over the place. We have a lot of proof and they know it's proof. They always talk about the big lie. They're the big lie. The big lie is a lot of bullshit. That's what it is." It's notable that neither Twitter nor Facebook took decisive action to ban Trump's promotion of his election lie until the January attack on Congress. Both platforms had been used extensively by Trump to undermine the integrity of the election and by his followers in organizing the January 6th rally. The impact of Trump's election lie has been profound. A Thomas Reuters poll of 2007 adults in May of 2021 shows its persistent impact. 61% of Republicans and 19% of independents continued to strongly agree or somewhat agree with the statement that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. Overall, 30% of the survey respondents continued to believe the election was stolen. This profound corruption of the public's belief is a direct consequence of the big lie strategy. Professor Timothy Snyder had additional comments about big lies in his January Twitter thread. He commented that a big lie must bring violence, as it has. Further, that a big lie can never be told just by one person. Trump is the originator of this big lie, but it could never have flourished without his allies on Capitol Hill. Politicians who do not tell the simple truth perpetuate the big lie, further an alternative reality, support conspiracy theories, weaken democracy, and foment violence far worse than that of January 6, 2021. Professor Snyder's statements about the relationship between big lies and violence should be a warning to every American. At a right-wing Turning Point rally in Idaho in October of 2021, one young man made these chilling comments. Referring to vaccine mandates, he said, "This is fascism. This is tyranny. When do we get to use the guns?" He went on to say, "No, that's not a joke, literally. Where's the line? How many elections are they going to steal before we kill these people?" Donald Trump's claim of a stolen election had been totally debunked by late December 2020. In mid-November, Chris Krebs, director of the Cybersecurity Agency and the Election Security Coordinating Council, along with a separate council representing state and local election officials, put out a joint statement calling the 2020 election the most secure in American history. The report stated, "There is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was any way compromised." In early December, Trump's own Attorney General William P. Barr declared that the Justice Department had not found any evidence of voter fraud that would change the outcome of the election. And by December 2020, courts in 6 contested states had dismissed all the lawsuits challenging election results. All told, at least 86 judges had rejected at least one post-election lawsuit, and 38 of them were appointed by Republicans. In sum, no credible evidence of election fraud had been found. It's worth reflecting again on the statement by Professor Snyder that a big lie can never be told by just one person. Trump is the originator of this big lie, but it could never have flourished without his allies on Capitol Hill. The Washington Post contacted all 249 Republicans in the House and Senate and asked them a simple question 3 weeks after the election. Who won the election? Only 37 admitted Biden won. 2 stated Trump won, and 208 said they were unsure or refused to answer. These big lie enablers did 2 unconscionable things. First, they failed to immediately recognize Joe Biden's win following the election, thus undermining public confidence in our democratic process. And second, they later attempted to undermine the will of the American people by objecting to certification of electors on January 6, 2020, hoping the confusion would move the decision about the election to Congress, where Republican states would control a majority vote. On January 6, 147 Republicans essentially voted to overturn the election of Joe Biden and deny the majority of Americans their choice of president. This is what enabling a big lie looks like. 12 Florida Republican congressional representatives and 1 senator failed to protect our democracy and the integrity of our election process. They failed to tell the truth of the 2020 election, and they participated in the election conspiracy to deny acceptance of the electoral results. These actions were doubly damaging to our democracy. First, by seeding distrust in our election process, and second, by using their claim of widespread fraud to justify passage of blatant voter suppression laws in Republican-controlled states, thus disenfranchising a broad swath of Americans. An example of a big lie enabler is Representative Greg Steube. In a Sarasota Herald-Tribune article published on January 7, 2021, Steube stated he doesn't blame Trump for the attack on the Capitol and was glad to support the president's efforts to overturn the election, saying there were clear irregularities. Just prior to the January 6th event, Steube had announced his plan to object to the Electoral College votes from 4 states. In his press release justifying his position, he referred to constitutional violations and irregularities, blatant improprieties, and fraudulent votes. Steube made these statements knowing full well that all of the state audits, court challenges, and election oversight bodies had found no evidence of fraud. Through his actions, Steube appears to have participated in a seditious conspiracy to undermine our constitutional election process, and in that act violated his congressional oath. Here are my summary thoughts about big lies and their embrace by the Republican Party. Former President Trump is the first president to use big lies as a political weapon to undermine our democracy. Big lies only work if they're shared and amplified by mainstream media, social media, and other members of the political establishment. The Republican Party and their donors are largely complicit in promoting the big lie and have protected Trump from any consequence of his lying. Big lies invariably lead to violence. Every American needs to understand that Trump and the Republican Party's promotion of big lies is strategic and intentional. Their assault on truth is a tactic used by authoritarians around the globe to undermine democracies. And the mere fact that they've chosen to use big lies as a core strategy should warn every citizen that this is a man and a party that must never be allowed to regain power, as they will lead us down a path of destruction, like other big liars have done to their nations. If you are as concerned about the future of our democracy as I am, here are a few actions you might consider taking. First, arm yourself with the truth about the 2020 election. See the list of articles and books associated with this blog post. Deny support for those who promote the big lie, political parties, candidates, and businesses. Demand candidates and political leaders publicly refute Trump's stolen election lie, and ask them to pledge to protect our democracy. Support candidates that vow to work to strengthen our democracy and expand access to the ballot box. Take actions and become a democracy advocate. See actions on our main page, and consider joining and supporting the democracy advocacy organizations listed on our resource page. Thank you for visiting Choose Democracy Now! Please check our website in the future for new blog posts and presentations